There's a museum that only displays things that never happened. It says so right on a brass plaque by the entrance, polished daily by a guard who refuses to explain the joke. Inside, the exhibits are strange, but modest. You might see a cracked teacup labeled "dropped during an argument that never occurred," or maybe a child's sneaker under glass, tagged "left behind on a train that was caught in time." Most visitors just nod thoughtfully, the way people do when they don't quite understand, but want to seem like they do. But then, on a quiet Tuesday, a new item appeared, with no announcement. It was a plain envelope, yellowed at the edges, placed carefully in the center of an empty room. The label was simple and sharp, the last letter you never sent. A woman named Eleanor stopped right in front of it, and she felt her knees go weak. "That's mine," she whispered. The guard shifted uncomfortably. "Many people say that," he said. "No," she insisted. "I recognize the handwriting." And it was true. The envelope bore her name in her own looping script, written the way she used to write before arthritis, before caution, before a lifetime of regret. Her fingers hovered just inches from the glass. "I never sent it," she said, her voice catching. "I couldn't." "That's why it's here," the guard replied, though he didn't sound too sure of himself. Eleanor had written that letter 30 years ago, on the night her brother packed his car and drove out of her life forever. They'd fought, over nothing, over everything, and she had poured all the words she couldn't to say out loud into that single envelope. Apologies, truths, and the simple, desperate sentence, "Please don't go." But she burned it before sunrise. "I destroyed it," she told the guard. He scratched his chin. "We get a lot of those." "Destroyed things?" she asked. "No," he said. "Destroyed moments." Against all the rules, Eleanor reached for the latch on the glass case. It opened easily, almost as if it was expecting her. Her hands shook as she lifted the envelope. It was warm. Inside was the letter, but it wasn't the one she remembered writing. The words were familiar but somehow altered. Lines she had crossed out were now written boldly. The apology was complete. The plea was crystal clear. And at the bottom was a sentence she had never dared to write. "If you leave, I will always be waiting." Eleanor's breath hitched. "That's not what I wrote," she stammered. The guard leaned in. His badge now read "Curator," though Eleanor was certain it hadn't a moment before. "It's what would have been written," he said gently. "Had you finished?" Her hands trembled. "Why show this to me now?" The room around her seemed to tilt and fade. The walls dissolved, replaced by the smell of gasoline and summer rain. Suddenly, Eleanor was standing in a driveway she hadn't seen in decades. A younger version of herself stood frozen on the porch, clutching an envelope, paralyzed by fear. Down the drive, her brother sat in his car, engine running, waiting. "Is this real?" Eleanor asked, her voice a whisper. "It can be," the curator said, "but only once." She looked at the letter. At the moment, stretched thin as glass. She had lived her life forward, sturdy and lonely, telling herself that some doors were just meant to close for good. Her brother glanced back at the house, just once, and Eleanor ran. She knocked on the car window, breathless, laughing and crying all at the same time. Her brother stared as if he was seeing a ghost. "I never sent it," she said, thrusting the envelope into his hands. "But I should have." He opened it, read the words, and swallowed hard. The world held its breath. Years later, a visitor paused in that same museum before a new exhibit, a simple painting of an empty driveway at sunset. The plaque read, "A goodbye that almost was." And somewhere far, far away from that museum, Eleanor set 2 mugs on her kitchen table. She smiled as she heard the familiar sound of a car pulling into the drive, late, as usual, but finally home.